President Biden this morning. You see, I have this terrible cold for 4 days now, and I'm really just propped up by medication to read a script until my next nap. Don't worry, I'll pick on another candidate here later, too. Last week, our sermon addressed some important points about anxiety and depression. When the Apostle Paul, he instructs us, do not be anxious about anything. We have to pay attention to that and ask ourselves, what might be causing such anxiety? We learned last week, surprise, surprise, that even Christians have disagreements, and those disagreements have happened even within the leaders of churches, even churches that the Apostle Paul planted. And the reason for that is because we're real people. We deal with real struggles in real life. Disagreements have even happened in these churches all the way from the beginning when they were first planted in Europe. Just because those people rubbed shoulders with the authors of the New Testament doesn't mean that they were immune from those stressful difficulties. And as you might expect, these relationship difficulties can lead to some of life's deepest anxieties. And many of you don't need anyone to teach you about that. You know what anxiety can come from relationship difficulties. Ask the man whose wife committed adultery on him, and he's weighing whether or not he should divorce her. Ask the woman who's recovering from another beating from her boyfriend. Ask the colleague who seems to be tormented at work by a superior so that she commits herself to an early retirement in poverty in order to escape this toxic relationship. Some of life's most serious anxiety comes through relationships, and at times those relationships aren't non-believers where you would expect that the problems would come from. They're believers. And that leads us to times of lying awake at night, trying to fall asleep for hours as these thoughts just keep running through our minds. We wake up in the middle of the night, and again, we can't sleep because of the turmoil that we're wrestling with. We're so distracted at work that we have to read a simple paragraph 3 or 4 times in order for it to sink in. But even then, we give up because we just can't concentrate. These struggles are real. So I gave you 2 practical strategies last week in dealing with anxieties in our sermon. But I want to pick up on this again because Paul picks up on this again. He continues to address it this week as well. Not that he was writing on a week-by-week basis, but nonetheless, we're addressing it in that way. So last week's concerns centered around humility, which I cautioned you is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. Today, Paul moved forward with the flip side of anxiety. He's not saying, don't think about those things. After all, if I challenge you, for the next minute, don't think of a pink elephant. What are you going to think about? Well, you're immediately going to think about a pink elephant. So, that being said, if I challenge you, or if you're trying not to think about a pink elephant, and I challenge you, for the next minute, I want you to think about Purple Bunny. Now, most of you would have no problem thinking about a purple bunny, seeing a cute little bunny hop around on the ground and that sort of thing. You're wondering, what caused it to become purple like that? Did it drink too many grapes? I don't know what the case might be, but you would have no problem thinking of a purple bunny jumping around, and you wouldn't have thought of a pink elephant. Unless, of course, you thought of a pink elephant stomping on a purple bunny, which then we've got some different things to counsel through. So Paul finished his instruction last week by challenging us in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving. Let your requests be made known to God. Even in that, he's presenting 3 different ways of asking God to cover all the bases. Think about that. If you've ever lain awake at night begging God for release from this anxiety, you know and requests are. You brought all of those before the Lord. You've made those things known to God. And you're not hiding what you are grateful and that you are grateful and thankful for, the other things. Of course, you're not hiding what you are grateful for because you started a gratitude journal last week, right? All of you did that, as a recommendation. Did anyone actually do that? Hey, we got somebody who is thankful for something, and what that does is it guards you against getting proud about things. You're saying, God, I'm thankful for this because I didn't deserve it, and yet I have it as a gift. And that is a response of humility. That is a position, a posture of humility. As Paul moves forward in his teaching, he presents another strategy we need to use to battle anxiety. He's not telling us, don't think of a pink elephant. He's not merely saying to us, present your request to God. He's giving us another offensive weapon against anxiety, against person-to-person anxiety, against person-to-person anxiety within the church, against person-to-person anxiety within the church with people who should know better and act better. Okay, maybe I need to spend a bit more time not thinking about pink elephants or stomping on purple bunnies because I'm starting to maybe get riled up a little bit myself. But let's look at what Paul teaches today, okay? And let's look at this starting with the first point, practicing the fruit of the mind. We start off right away with an incredible list of purple bunnies. That's what they are. They're an incredible list of things to think about. Paul is saying, I'm putting this in your mind. I want you to dwell on it. I want you to think of it. I want you to love these things. And so these are gifts. These are purple bunnies that he's giving to you to think about. Now, in order to squeeze the most out of these words, I want to go through each one individually. Picture, if you will, some delicious grape juice. Maybe, out of the wine press, the press has just gone down, the grape juice is there. If you're an Episcopal, yes, okay, that's wine. If you're a Baptist, well, that's just grape juice. Either way. So picture this beautiful grape juice coming out. And this is where the picking on others comes in. It's beautiful. Who does that remind you of? Donald Trump, maybe? Everything is beautiful to him. I mean, even the bills that he signed, as president. Oh, it's a beautiful bill. We came up with a beautiful. Okay, it's a beautiful grape juice that you're seeing come out of this, and you want to sop up every last drop of that grape juice. You don't want to waste anything, so you use a sponge to sop up everything, and you wring that sponge out. And that's what we're doing out of this text. We're trying to get every last bit of goodness that the Lord would give us out of this text. So we want to squeeze everything out of this sponge that we can. And we start with, finally, brothers, whatever is true. This is not a politically correct term in our day, is it? To say true. Whatever is true, truth is not seen as what actually is, but rather people define their own truth. Well, that might be true for you, but it's not true for me. Have you heard that before? It's true for them, they say, but that's ridiculous on the face of it, because if we don't have an objective basis for truth, there is no basis for morality or laws or punishment or righteousness or beauty. Objective reality means that something that you are looking at, something that you are seeing objectively, that is, you see it as an object. You get where I'm going with this? Now, subjective things, that's related to you. That's your own interpretation of it. That is from your eyes as a subject. But that's not object. That's not object as we see it. For example, I'm going to demonstrate here with something that I brought from my office, that those of you that have been to my office will appreciate this here. Now, what I have here is a beautiful Green Bay Packers paperweight that is etched inside by lasers. It's got this beautiful laser etching of a Green Bay Packers helmet and the Green Bay Packers logo, all these beautiful, beautiful things, right? There are some objective realities in this and some subjective realities in that sentence, aren't there? The objective reality is that this is a paperweight and that I have it right here, that the exists. It's right here in my hand, and you can see it, and I can see it, and so we can talk about it as an object. Now, subjectively, I can say that it is a beautiful, laser-etched Green Bay Packers paperweight. Jerry Swirsky, on the other hand, would like to have words with me about this, whether in fact it is beautiful. I think it's beautiful because I am a subject who has an opinion about this object. Jerry is a subject who has a wrong opinion about this object. You see how subjective this can be? Of course, we laugh because opinions are subjective. They aren't right or wrong. They can be poorly formed, and others might have evidence to contradict an opinion and to inform that person further, but that evidence appeals to something objective. Does that make sense? In short, that which is true is that which corresponds to reality. That has been my definition of what is true since my days at college. As I'm thinking through these things, as I'm thinking through the objective and the subjective, that which corresponds to reality is true. It's what really is. But I was shocked when I heard this past week an atheist say in a debate that I was listening to that truth is what corresponds to reality. I was shocked because I was like, wait a minute, that's my definition. Now we've got a working starting place. A place that we can talk, something that we can look at objectively. You see how important that is? And Paul sees this truth as so, true. He sees it so true that he encourages us to think and to cogitate and to have thoughts churn over and over again in our minds over the truth. Next, Paul gives us this word, honorable. This means simply whatever is august, whatever is venerable, whatever is reverent. So you're all supposed to think of me and Pastor John when you think of this, because we're reverends, right? No, please don't do that, okay? But that being said, I do want to thank you for last week's special event of acknowledging us as pastors for Pastor Appreciation Month. That really meant a lot. It really did, because it surprised me, first of all. So, Jerry, you really got me on that one. I did not see that coming. And it really was just very, very honoring. Just given my past circumstances and things, it really meant a lot. So thank you so much. So next, we are supposed to think on what is just. This is the weighing of the scales so that there is no favoritism for one person or the other. Are you familiar with that picture of Lady Justice holding the scales, and she's what? Blindfolded. Why is she blindfolded? Because she's not supposed to be looking at who is who and who am I supposed to favor? What does that person look like? What is that person's background? What does that person wear? No, none of that. Justice is saying the right side is equal to the left side. That's what the scales are all about. This past week, for me at least, it's been a difficult one because as I watched the events unfold in the Middle East, this strikes a chord. It's somebody who has spent 20 years focusing on the Middle East and Muslims. Whether people think that the Palestinians should own the land, or that since they've been living there for 3,000 years, or whether they think that Israel should be granted the land because they were granted it in 1949, the atrocities that we are seeing played out on the world scene leave people wonder, how can anyone support the burning of infants in their cribs? Or the beheading of children and captive soldiers, or the raping of women? And yet people are protesting in support of Hamas, even here in Chicago or elsewhere in the U.S. Attacks have been perpetrated against Jews here in the U.S., as well as the brutal stabbing of an embassy employee in China. I watch for signs of the end times carefully, but I never expected that in a week's time, people would actually be speaking their anti-Semitism out loud. On a humanitarian basis alone, we as the church should speak out against every instance of injustice. To think about this stark difference, this line between what is right and what is wrong, what is righteous and what is unrighteous, what is just and what is unjust. Paul is calling our attention to think about these things. He's taking a highlighter and rubbing it over and over and over on justice. Next, we think about what is pure. Faith and I, my daughter Faith and I, were born at the same hospital in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. It's called St. Agnes, but it's known locally as St. Agnes Hospital. Nonetheless, Agnes is this word that we're talking about. It means pure, modest, chaste. That's almost a foreign concept today. But we are to think pure thoughts. We're to think about what is attractive and lovely. Men and women alike are tempted by what is attractive. After all, it's attractive. If it weren't attractive, you wouldn't be drawn into it. You wouldn't be attracted to it. It attracts our attention. So when you think about what is attractive, are you thinking of what is pure? Is your purity guiding your respect of what is attractive? The last one to think of is what is commendable. And this is the word where we get euphemism from. It means saying a good word. So a euphemism is saying a good word instead of a bad word. Instead of being like minions and saying, wow, we use a euphemism that is more commendable, like backside or bum instead of bottom, right? It's a euphemism, and bottom itself is a euphemism for another word that I'm not going to say here. We're supposed to think of all of these honorable and beautiful and commendable things because they have excellence in them. Paul knows that our mind goes haywire when we are dealing with anxiety. So he redirects our thoughts to these excellent things to counteract the natural tendency during anxiety. As I was meditating on these different things, I thought of the way that the fruit of the Spirit are love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. But what are the fruit of the mind? Isn't that what we have here? Isn't this the fruit of the mind? Our minds should be wholly occupied by whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, because they have excellence. They are worthy of praise. So, in your peace and rejoicing, do you show the fruit of the mind? Our second point here for today is mega rejoicing for friends. That was a big point. I went through a lot there. But hey, I didn't write the book. That was Paul's responsibility. So blame it on him. Paul is the one who put 7 whoppers into one verse. I didn't do that. So if we go over time, blame it on Paul, not on me. Now, Paul again uses himself as an example for the believers in as much as he is a follower of the Lord. He writes, what you have learned and received and heard in me and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. What's cool about this is that we are, right now, laying the groundwork for how we do discipleship. That's what we're doing here at Bethany. We're asking that the elders task me and John to explore discipleship, how we make mature believers. There are some big churches, notably, well, I'll just say it. I mean, they admit to this, but Willow Creek, amazing church. 25,000 people from through the 1980s, the 1990s. They did an exceptional job at bringing people into the faith. at making the gospel attractive to people. And they assessed themselves. They were like, wait a minute, we're bringing a lot of people in the door, and there are a lot of people going out the door as well. And they asked themselves, what are we doing wrong? What's happening here? We didn't make mature disciples. We made disciples, but we didn't walk them through to maturity. So that's what we're looking at Bethany. What can we do in order to make them mature disciples? In order to walk people from youth group into membership, into responsible leadership at Bethany. It's a beautiful thing that we're seeing even take place in the members that are being welcomed here in the next few weeks. What's cool about this is, yes, that we are going through this discipleship. And discipleship is the process of learning. It's the process of maturing. It's getting to know more of as a believer, as a follower. And that is actually the root of the word math. Now, obviously, math takes intentional learning, but it also takes discipline. And that's another word for discipleship, right? That same word is what is used here. The same word is used for math as is for discipleship. And that's where we get this word discipleship. Some people equate discipline with punishment. And it certainly can be. You can be punished for something that you do wrong. But the point is that the discipline is intended to lead to growth, to learning, to discipleship that comes out of it. One of the 3 majors that my son Jonathan is finishing in college is mathematics. Now, to me, I went through calculus, so I am one of those who thinks that this would be punishment, not discipline, right? That's my subjective opinion. But for him, my son sees incredible beauty in mathematics, and it leads him closer to God. How awesome is that? So when we look at these 4 things that the Philippians watched in the missionary Paul, we see the basis of discipleship. What have you learned? What have you received? What have you heard? What have you seen? Sue asked me, and she didn't know I was going to say this, she asked me a beautiful question some time ago. She said, and she probably never thought that I would be comparing him to Donald Trump with that. But how do I grow as a Christian? What an earnest question. I was so thankful for that. I answered with 4 things. I said, well, first, keep going to church. You're doing the right thing right now. Keep going to church because that is how you will learn more. Second, read your Bible every day. Third, pray to the Lord every day. And fourth, do what the Bible says and what God says in prayer. Those 4 things. Now, those 4 things are not unlike what Paul said here. First, learn. Second, receive. Third, listen. And fourth, watch. That word listen, I just have to point this out. We're familiar with that because of Deuteronomy chapter 6. Deuteronomy chapter 6 says, Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one God. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. You shall write these commands on your wrists and on your foreheads. Put them on the outer gates and the inner doors of your home. What did that mean? Well, it was a constant reminder. If you see something on your wrist, like my watch there, who's that for? Well, that's for me. Well, if it's on your forehead, who's that for? I don't look up there very often to get reminded of anything. That's for you. That's for everybody else. It's to identify to all of you, I'm a follower of God, and it's to remind myself, I'm a follower of God. It's the same thing in the Middle East. You have an outer gate around your property, and that's where you're supposed to put a symbol for everybody else. And then on inside of that gate, or yard, you could say, there's a building, and on that doorpost of your house, you're supposed to put these reminders as well. These reminders that the Lord is one. The outer gate is for everybody else. The inner gate is for you. That's where you do life. That's where you have your barbecue. That's where you play with your kids and all of these different things. It's always a constant reminder of who you are walking in life with Christ. I answered those four things, and Paul is saying something the same here when he says, listen. That's that first word of the Shema statement. Listen. Hear, O Israel. It's not just turn up the music or turn out the volume or something like this. It's not that sort of listen. It's listen and obey. Listen and obey. When you see these things in Paul's life, this is the process of discipleship. Listen and obey. Next, Paul says in verse 10 that he mega rejoiced over the Philippians, that they were watching over him again. In fact, he says that he mega rejoices, and I'm not just making that up. He says megalos in that word. He rejoices megalos. So he mega rejoices in this verse. In fact, he says that he mega rejoices that they are thinking their thoughts about him again. Now, what did we end our last sermon with? Thinking obsessive thoughts. So many thoughts just running through your mind with anxiety. And now, what does Paul start out with? He says, think all of these thoughts about... Continue with. Think all of these thoughts. You're thinking all of these thoughts about me, your missionary. That causes me to mega rejoice. We delight when we know that we're not forgotten. And that people really think of us. And that they care for us. That's what the Philippians were doing when they gave generously to help Paul out. When they went through the effort and expense of sending short-term missionaries to check on him, he made rejoice. Even so, he wants to make it clear that he's not manipulating them. He's trying to be candid and to tell them that he is really thankful and that they are so concerned about him without laying a guilt trip on them, that they should be giving more because he's so poor. You know what I've been saying, that humility is not thinking less of yourself, but it's thinking of yourself less? Well, thinking less of yourself, saying, oh, I am so poor, that would be guilt tripping them. Paul is following his own advice right here. He is not guilt tripping them. He is not manipulating them and working his language so that they will come over to his side, so that they will feel obligated to give more. Paul is following his own advice. He's not saying, woe is me, I'm in such dire straits, I'm so poor. Paul is practicing what he's preaching by thinking of himself less. It's not about him. He is content. So in your peace and rejoicing, do you show the fruit of the mind? The last point here for today, and it's a quick one, is whatever. Now, when I say here that Paul is saying whatever, I'm not saying that he is cavalier about his needs or that he's fatalistic or that he's given up hope or something like that. It's not that kind of whatever. Instead, it's a kind of whatever, like the book I mentioned a while back, Unoffendable. You remember that book? We have 2 copies here in the library. When people say something unkind about you, whatever. If you are brought low, whatever. If you abound and you are living in plenty, whatever. Turn every circumstance into praise and gratitude to the Lord. When you write in that gratitude journal that you started last week, right? The grocery store was out of mini wheats today, so I had to settle for Raisin Bran. I'm thankful I have cereal. Okay, that could be one example. Or if you don't have a job to get money for cereal, you could say, I'm thankful I at least have a job. Or if you just got fired from your job, I'm thankful I'm healthy. Or if you just found that you have cancer or something, well, I'm thankful it's not stage 4. Or if it's stage 4 and you get that diagnosis, and so you don't have many weeks, you don't have a job, you've got cancer, it's stage 4, I'm thankful I get to see Jesus soon. soon. Ha! I win, Satan, right? So we always have a way to turn this into gratitude. Even if it's the worst possible scenario. A scenario where I get to see Jesus soon. You can have peace. Gratitude can lead you to that sort of peace. You can have peace that passes all understanding. In your peace and rejoicing, do you show the fruit of the mind? That's what you're calling as you grow as a disciple of Jesus. That's what your calling is. So in conclusion, let me ask you this. What specific things will you do about this? Is there anything that the Lord is prompting you to do as a response so that you can show yourself to be an obedient disciple, so that you can do just what Paul says, following those 4 things? What are you going to do? Secondly, who will you tell? Is there anybody that you are feeling encouraged to tell about this truth? It does not look like we have any questions today. So let me pray and we'll continue in our musical worship. Lord Jesus, commit these thoughts to our minds. Lord, let us dwell on these things, not on all of our troubles, not on all the persecution that we face, not on all the torments, the difficulties, the circumstances that might be extreme. Lord, instead, just let us focus on these good things. And in our thinking of good things, Lord, for each other, as well as for others around us that need to hear the gospel, as well as for others around the globe that need to hear the gospel. May we be those that pray, that seriously pray to lift up even places like Palestine right now, Israel, where terrible atrocities are